Okay, so how about we get started?
Sounds great.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the April 2025 edition of AZBioPEERS. We're very excited to have Public Affairs Executive Mary Kay Turner joining us to discuss maximizing the impact with strategic investment of time and resources in industry and medical conferences. We all know how important it is to really be sure we make our impact, and really we know how much we have to invest in industry and medical conferences. So we're very excited to hear really the insight from Mary Kay Turner. And I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Dylan, and I'm happy to be here today. I really appreciate you inviting me. Just a little bit of background on me. I spent a lot of my career at a large pharmaceutical company, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and had various leadership roles in sales, in public policy, government affairs, advocacy, communications. And about 8 years ago, I decided to pivot my career. I had always wanted to be at a small biotech company, bringing a product from the bench to patients. And so I work now for BrainStorm Cell Therapeutics. I'm Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Advocacy, and we are developing an autologous mesenchymal stem cell therapy for ALS. If you ever want to hear any more about ALS or the heterogeneity or the difficulty of the disease, I literally had no idea how difficult this disease was. But I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you because I sit in your seat and I make the same sort of decisions that you make all the time on resources and how we spend our resources because at a small and emerging companies, our resources are limited. Um, so how do we decide what conferences we attend? There's so many to attend. There's so many different categories, whether it's a advocacy conference, whether it's a professional society, whether it's an investor. And so one of the things that we do is we have a SharePoint, and in fourth quarter we put down all of the meetings that are coming up for the upcoming year. Their dates, we put them chronologically. Then we talk about the deadlines for abstracts, the cost of attending, the cost of sponsoring, if it might be a meeting that we want to sponsor, and then who's in charge. So that way you kind of have a year at a glance, you have it on a SharePoint, you can keep up with it, and then you can make strategic decisions on what are the best meetings to attend, because we all know that we can't attend every meeting. So hopefully by the end of this session, um, you'll be able to have these takeaways. We all know that conferences are valuable platforms for sharing our knowledge, for positioning our company for growth, and we'll dive into how we can help increase the visibility, build relationships, but those always have to be aligned with our business objectives. Strategic planning, as I talked about a little earlier, is really essential to ensuring the company is targeting the right conferences that align with your scientific and business goals. We know that conferences are expensive, but with the right strategies, we can increase our presence, our visibility without exceeding our budget. And we'll talk about ways to do that. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll all be better. And I'd love to hear your experiences as we go along as well. So, why do conferences matter? Conferences really act as an intersection between industry leaders, patients, key opinion leaders, regulatory bodies, investors, academic researchers. And leveraging these opportunities allow us as small and emerging biotech companies to gain credibility and exposure in front of our potential partners and really our investors. It's a great way to engage stakeholders, um, and to build relationships, to sit with people over coffee, over dinner. And it's a great opportunity to amplify our scientific data on our business strategy. And so if there's ever an opportunity to submit an abstract or a poster, or if you have new data and you can do a podium presentation, those are all really high value activities that we should try and participate in. So when you're thinking about conferences, ask yourself, what are the goals for attending the conference? Who are you aiming to attract? Are you aiming to attract investors? Are you recruiting patients for a trial? Or are you building relationships with thought leaders? Clear goals will help you guide what strategy and ensure your investment is targeted. When I first started at BrainStorm, I went to a lot of the rare disease conferences, which are really great and have really great content, but there weren't a lot of people and advocates with ALS at those conferences. So I've pivoted my strategy and our company strategy to really attending the more ALS focused events like Northeast ALS Alliance, or there's ALS Summit. And those we can really connect with the key opinion leaders who are doing our trials, as well as patient advocacy groups who can help us recruit. So it just all depends. And then, of course, our CEO and CFO attend all of the key high profile investment conferences. So you really need to decide to what is it and what kind of visibility, what kind of partnerships, and what's the cost. So that's the decision making framework. So again, we talked a little bit about high impact events are those where you can make meaningful connections and showcase your company's strength. You consider the audience. Will it consist of who will it consist of and who do you want to be there? Some of these, like FDA town halls, hopefully we'll still have those in the future. Those are usually free. Patient-focused drug development are usually free. Again, the patient advocacy conferences are great. The investor, JP Morgan, Bio. One other thing that we have done at some of these scientific and medical conferences, and even the advocacy, is outside of the times of conference, as long as it's allowed, we have done roundtables because all of the people that we want to talk to and get feedback are there, and we've done scientific advisory councils. So they're also a good time to conduct some of your business needs, but as long as the conference allows it and it's outside of the time of the conference. So what are cost-effective visibility strategies? I know at BMS, we'd have a big booth, we'd send a lot of people, but that doesn't happen in the ecosystem, part of the ecosystem that we're at. So it's always great to have abstracts and posters to share your data for credibility. We've done many things where we'll co-partner and co-present with an advocacy group, with a patient living with the disease, with one of our key opinion leaders. Social media is a great way if you have I think we all have LinkedIn, but most of us have an X account. And so it's great to talk about, that you're going to attend this conference, the data that you're going to present. If the data is significant, you may want to do a press release around it. And then lastly, you could participate in panels and roundtables. That's a great way to get visibility for your company and instead of a booth. Sometimes booths are nice, and especially if you have an FDA approved product, but I think most of us don't have an FDA approved product yet. So those are some ways. So how do you network? Networking isn't just about attending events. We know that the content of these is very good, but it's about being proactive. So reach out to potential partners, collaborators, and thought leaders before the event to schedule the meeting. Some conferences will share with you their target lists, others won't. But if you know that someone might be there, you have their email, send out to them, I'm going to be there. Could you grab coffee in the morning? Can you meet at a coffee break? Can we sit together at lunch? And then think, what's your elevator pitch? Prioritize your engagements. What are the 5 to 7 people that you want to meet at this meeting? And what do you want to talk to them about? So for example, there was a specific ALS meeting that took place last fall. And I went along with my CEO, and our goal was to meet with about 6 people who we were interested in being PIs for our phase 3B trial coming up in ALS. And we wanted to talk to them, understand what their capabilities at their site were. And we were able to do that at breaks, before dinner, after dinner. So that was our goal for that conference. And then what's your follow-up? So then we had our clinical ops person follow up afterwards to do, a site capability to see if they would be able to participate in our trial because our it's almost like a live organ because it's your own cells and it's an intrathecal injection. And so it's not a small molecule or even a biologic, so it's a little more complicated to do our clinical trial. So that was the goal. That's how we optimize that. When our CFO and CEO go to the investor conferences, their goal is to meet with people who are interested in investing in ALS and sharing the data that we have with them. So how do you measure your impact? Because it's important if you're spending your valuable resources, not just the money, but the time, because we know at small biotech companies, we have, limited time and we all have so many things on our plate. So it's important to track the number of meetings that you have and how you're following up with them. And again, a SharePoint can work for it. You can use a dashboard to visualize outcomes. You can map to show engagement. And again, if the conferences allows, plan an advisory committee, a scientific in conjunction, because many stakeholders are already there. So it's a great way to meet with some of the key people. So just a couple of ways that we do it, like if we go to a meeting, this is, how many members of a professional society did we meet with? How many advocates? How many potential partners that might be interested in investing? And how many KOLs or healthcare practitioners were we able to connect with? So you can see that. Then you can track year to date. These are the conferences we attended. This is who we engaged with. Some people, you can put the names of the people, you can assign people to those names. We just kind of try and do it higher level. And then this is just another way to look at it. The number of people that you were able to engage with, and then, what are some of the outcomes of meeting with some of those people and what did they result in? So we always want to have continuous improvement. So as you're continuing to plan conferences and plan your resources after the meeting, give it a few days to let people process the meeting and then conduct a Zoom debrief. What worked? What didn't work? Would they attend that conference again? And then score events on impact versus expectations. I mean, sometimes I've gone to meetings and I've only found two people, but those two people were a home run. And other people, I might have met with 12 and none of them, paid off in terms of what our goals were. So it just really depends. It's not always quantity. And then refine your strategy annually. You'll find different meetings as you move on in your business and always be mindful and thoughtful about what meetings you're going to attend. All right, so who should attend these meetings? We're off, most of us are really small teams. So if it's a medical event, usually it's a CMO or an MSL or maybe the ClinOps person if we're looking to find sites. I do our KOL development from a non-medical point of view. And so sometimes I attend the medical events. The investor events are obviously the CEO, CFO. If you have a business development lead, advocacy events, the advocacy lead, patient engagement lead. If you have limited resources, then some companies have a head of external affairs who tend to run these. I find that most companies don't have that, but you should assign one person internally that owns this so that they're looking, oh, in 3 months we have this abstract due. Do we have any new data? Are there people going to be attending this that we want to go? You want someone to own it so that they're driving it and they're following up and you're getting the right team so that you get the right results. All right, so what are the takeaways? You want to maximize conference impact. It's important to plan ahead. You want to leverage network opportunities ahead, and you want to continually assess the impact. The key is to ensuring that every conference you attend aligns with your long-term business goals. You want to be intentional. You want to track everything. Data drives improvement. And don't underestimate the relationships that you will build. I've been attending a couple of these ALS meetings for 8 years now. And, we have a seat at the table. As a small biotech company, we have a seat at the table because I've been there. I have relationships with all of the people. If something's going on, they'll pick up the phone and call me. That's a little harder to quantify than others, but that is important to have those sorts of relationships. All right, so that's what I had for you today. I hope that met what you were all looking for. So I'd love to hear your questions or insights about conference strategy and how you've used conferences in your own experience.
Sure, yes, anybody feel free to place any questions in the chat or raise your hand, and I can definitely unmute you. And I
And
do have a few questions, Mary Kay.
yeah.
So I was really wondering, like, how do you prioritize which stakeholders that you engage with? Like, we know we have limited face time in these conferences. So
Mhm.
how have you found kind of the best strategy to focus on which stakeholders that you plan to engage with?
Yeah, so it depends what my goal for that conference was. So right now, the goal is we're getting ready to start our 3B trial. And so if I'm attending a conference where there are neurologists, ALS neurologists, my goal would be to let them know that we are starting a 3B trial. Here's our inclusion exclusion criteria. Here's the sites. We're not enrolling yet, but if you have patients, so it depends. We have a goal for every conference we attend, and then we engage the stakeholders around that goal. Another when we were planning the 3B trial, it was the FDA had given us feedback after our previous trial that we needed more data. So there were some skeptics that weren't real supportive of us. And so my goal with those meetings, and again, these are with the key opinion leaders, was to share, look, you were skeptical of the data. We still stand behind our data, but the FDA has given us feedback, and then to share with them that we are going for another trial, and this is the patient population we're going after. And so it's whatever the goal for that is. Um, and sometimes with advocates, like with the patients, everybody wants in the trial, but only so many people can get in the trial because of the inclusion exclusion criteria. The endpoint in ALS is a scale and it can't measure everything. And so sometimes it's explaining to the vocal advocates why you can't have a trial that includes everyone because you can't meet your endpoint. So it really varies on whatever your goal is. And for the investor conferences, of course, it's to get to the people who might be interested, who've invested in ALS, who would be willing to do that.
Yeah, so it's really, you have to really understand your goal
Right.
far before you attend that conference.
Right, right.
And we have another question in the chat. Do you have any tips on balancing conference attendance with our day jobs that still go on in the background?
Yeah, that's hard, right? And so, especially when you're at a small company, because most of us wear four, five, or six hats. And so, what I do is I choose the conference, the people that I want to meet with, and I look at the agenda, the most important, high value for me and for the company sessions, and then I'll take, an hour in a session that doesn't apply to me. And I'll sit and I'll return phone calls, I'll return emails or do the project that I'm working on because not every session is applicable to what we're doing. So that's kind of what I do. But unfortunately, I've found, and maybe you guys haven't, but when you're working with a smaller emerging company, it's 24/7, unfortunately. It's different than when you're at a bigger company. And I mean, I always tell people if I don't do it, no one's going to do it because there's no one to do it besides me, the job that I do. And the same with everybody else in the company. And I'm sure it's the same with everyone else on here.
Yeah, definitely. And another question, so we know as small emerging companies, we really have to prioritize which conferences that we attend. They can be very costly. So if we can only attend one investor or collaboration conference for a biomedical startup, do you have a recommendation on which conference that you would really prioritize or how we can strategize to think about which conference may be most appropriate for us?
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what field you're in. You say biomedical, but I think it's the one that most aligns with your business and has the most important people there, if it's only one. The other thing that I've done is I've offered to sit on multiple panels and got my conference fee comped. So that's another thing you can do. The other thing you can do is say we're a really small company and I know, that, like some of these conferences, are so expensive and sometimes they have different levels for different companies. Sometimes they don't, but that's something to try. But I think you have to look at the agendas and you can pull agendas from past years. If there's someone that you're wanting to meet and they're speaking at that conference, that might be worthwhile. It's really difficult to decide.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that's where networking really is the most valuable because we can, if I'm a medical device startup, I need to talk to other medical device experts, people that have had that success, and really get that insight from them, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
We have another question. Can you go back to the early slide with the different conferences that you have attended or considered attending?
Yeah. I just put that together. I mean, I don't know that I've attended, I probably throughout my career have attended.
It's like you're breaking up a little bit there. Can you hear me, Mary Kay?
My,
Okay, there. I think you're back.
am I back? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, every time I change the slides, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So what I was saying on these are just some of the ones that I've attended in the past, because I worked in oncology, I worked in HIV/AIDS, I've worked in rheumatology, I've worked in neuroscience, I've worked in hepatitis, and now I worked in MS and now I work in ALS. And so, and I've worked in diabetes too. So I just pulled up some of them. I just wanted to give an example of how varied they were. But there's no real reason why I put all these on here.
Sure.
Does that?
And in terms of investor conferences, where have you found your best ROI or most success?
Yeah, so I'm not the best person to ask that question to because I'm not the person who raises money at the company. That's our CEO and CFO. They usually go to JP Morgan, but and I can't, and they usually go to Bio CEO. But there's a conference that's associated with JP Morgan that's smaller and less expensive, and I'll find it afterwards, and they sometimes will go to that. But it really is targeted and finding the people who want to invest in your area.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I know people have, especially with early stage conferences like Resi, that can be very helpful just because they are focused more on the early stage companies.
Right. And some of the advocacy organizations like Muscular Dystrophy Association, they have like seed money that they'll do for really early companies in muscular dystrophies. There's all kinds of things like that. That isn't as much my area to focus on. So I think, you know, I'm probably not the best person to give you the best advice in that, but
For sure, yeah, I think just talking to as many people as possible is will be the most helpful, I think.
well, and we know that it is such a difficult environment out there in biotech right now. I mean, I've been doing this almost 30 years, and I mean, I've never seen a market quite like this. And so, I know there's so much change. And what I tell people is that everything goes in cycles.
Yeah.
And they need companies like us. It's so important that small companies, we're the ones that do all the innovation. And so I'm a glass half full, hopeful person that believes the environment will change.
Yeah,
For the better. We may have to go through some pain, which we all are.
sure. And if we think about kind of the pre-conference outreach, do you have any tips on setting meetings beforehand, or have you found an ideal timeline that has been most successful for you?
Yeah, we usually reach out about a week before and just say, we see you're attending the conference. We're attending it too. We would love to connect with you over breakfast. If we have their email, some of them we know already, some of them are cold and we'll do on LinkedIn. And, just asking them if they have any free time. Sometimes they get in the night before earlier. And so we'll say, could we meet for coffee or a drink the night before? Some of them are, go out later. You could do it when the conference is over, maybe after a dinner, before a dinner. I try and be as flexible as I can. And then I keep a schedule so that I know where I'm scheduling people so that I'm not over scheduling. But it generally really works well. To do that. And about a week before, some won't give out their some conferences won't give out their attendee list, but then you can just say, look, I'm attending DIA next week. Are you attending? I would love to connect and discuss whatever it is that you want to discuss.
Sure. So social media, LinkedIn, things like that can definitely come in
Yes,
handy there.
absolutely. Yeah.
And
Or
another
here's
question.
or
I'm sorry.
one other idea if that I use my network a lot. So I'll go, oh, Dylan, I see you're connected with so and so. Will you send me an email and connect me because we may be at the same conference? And generally that works really well because if someone knows Dylan, they're going to get back. It's better than a cold call. So if you know someone who knows that person, and most people want to help, and whenever someone asks me to connect them to someone, I will always do that.
Yeah, that soft introduction is really, really helpful for sure.
Yeah.
And another question we have, do you view conferences as a primary or a secondary role to kind of get your company out there in terms of finding investors or putting your company's findings primarily through conferences or other means?
So I think conferences are the ticket to the dance. You have to have some sort of visibility. It's great if we can get our data published in a peer-reviewed top-tier journal because we want to do that too. But I think we definitely have to have some sort of presence and some sort of seat because you become one of that community. And that's how things happen. You're part of whatever that ecosystem is that you work in. And being there and establishing that relationship really makes a difference. So I think it's primary. I think we have to do it. We don't have to go to everyone. We don't have to be the largest sponsor. I mean, sometimes it's just an attendance can make a difference.
Yeah, so just making sure that you're there. I'm sure the more times that your face is out there, your company's name is out there, people get more comfortable and are more willing to learn about what you do.
Absolutely.
And in terms of when we really look to measure our return on investment with these conferences, really, which KPIs really have you found that best capture the conference ROI for early stage biotech companies?
Yeah, so I mean numbers speak. So it's the number of people and you can even tier like we met with three tier one people, two tier two, and, four others. And then what was the outcome? And of course, we all have to be you have to be careful about the way you're quantifying things, right? Because many of these fall under sunshine, many of them are physicians or advocacy groups. But you can say we met and discussed possible participation as a PI in the trial. We met and we discussed possible investment. And so I think it's the number of people that you're meeting with. And then was there any outcome to that? And, like one outcome, we met with someone from an advocacy group and we wanted some feedback on our data. And they asked us to do a full data review. And then they sent it out to a number of key opinion leaders. And we got some really good feedback on that data. So it's hard to quantify, but you can put the key performance index there was that we got actionable feedback on data for our next trial.
Yeah, that's definitely very helpful. And do we have any other questions in the audience before I jump into more of my questions? Okay, so I want to go into like a little bit more long-term community building. So beyond just like the lead generation, how do you cultivate an ongoing community or network that really keeps your company top of mind?
Yeah, so that I really call that ecosystem building and infrastructure building. And so you meet the people at these meetings, you find what they're most interested in, shared common objectives, because we don't set their objectives, they don't set ours, but one of the things may be earlier diagnosis of whatever disease it is, or and so you start to work with them and you start to build meaningful type relationships that lead to, strategies and plans that you can work together. It might be earlier diagnosis in ALS, it might be biomarkers in ALS. And so you find areas that you continue to work with them and you get a seat at their table and they get a seat at your table. And I mean, that takes a long time to build that sort of network. When I joined the ALS community, there was really one large advocacy group. There was a few patient advocates, and now that infrastructure is really growing, and they have really made some meaningful policy changes because we've all worked together. So you try and get the community to work together because yes, we're all working on our own intellectual property, our own device, our own therapy. But if you make the policies better for the environment and to move things forward, that's something everybody can get engaged with. And then also to get feedback from people. Like when we developed our clinical trial, obviously we had a group of scientific advisory council, but we also had a group of patient and caregivers that came to us. And so it's continuing to foster that, to bring those people in so that they're part of your team and we're part of their team in a compliant way. And so that's really, Dylan, a long-term strategy that takes a long time to do. And I think a lot of companies may not have a person that does all the external affairs and advocacy. So that's going to rely on someone else in that company. And so that's a decision, when do you decide to bring in someone like me who does external affairs, who does communications, who does advocacy, who does government affairs? Brainstorm decided early on because the community infrastructure needed to be built. So I started with the beginning of the last phase 3 trial 8 years ago. That's early. Most companies wouldn't do it that early. But I think it was a good decision for them. And so I think as you get closer to having a marketed product, it's important to have an external affairs and a communications person that can build those relationships and build those networks and foundations.
And at what stage have you found that most companies really focus on that area and bring in someone externally?
I think it's closer to having an approved product, an FDA approved device or product. Usually it's a go-to-market strategy. In smaller companies, in bigger companies, it's a prepare the market strategy. And it really depends what the ecosystem is like within whatever you're working in, device or disease state. I mean, some have very, like if you're going into the oncology community, there's a lot of oncology advocates that you can work with and that might not take a huge lift to have someone in your company do it part-time.
Or,
I mean, the
and another,
biggest thing is you want to be connecting with these people because you want to be aligned, even though they might not agree with every decision you make. If you're sharing, you're giving you the rationale, because it's really hard when you do something and some of these communities will come out against what you've decided because they don't feel like they've had a seat at the table or been communicated to.
oh, right. Yeah, I do see how that would be very important. And we have another question. How much do your medical and scientific colleagues focus on the competitive landscape and emerging data at conferences?
So we do that. I mean, crazily enough, I do that.
Okay.
So I do all of our competitive intelligence. I send it on, they analyze it. I'm not a scientist by training, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And so I will go around and find all the posters. I mean, if I'm with our head of R&D or if I'm with our chief medical officer, they'll come with me. And I track all of our competitors and all of their publications, and then they'll translate it. But yeah, that's a very important part that I forgot to talk about that we do at these meetings is we'll see what other people are presenting and find out what the trend is. Like right now in ALS, it's TDP-43 and UNC13A, and those are the mechanisms of the day that are really important to talk about. And so we definitely follow that at the conferences. And it's important to know what your competitors are doing because you get ideas from them as well, because your data may have some of the same things that you can share.
Sure. And there might be an opportunity for a collaboration if things are focused a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of the kind of roundtables or workshops, like how really have you run or participated in these workshops? And really what formats drove the best attendee engagement for you?
Okay, so do you mean the ones that the company planned or the ones that the conference planned?
The ones that the conference plans, yeah.
Yeah. So generally, it's just getting engaged with the conference leaders in the beginning and, say, and generally, sometimes they'll come to me or we'll come to them and say, I want to do a panel. So there's the fourth annual ALS Drug Summit that's coming up in 2 weeks. And they came to me and said, will you moderate a panel on ALS drug development, decisions to participate in a clinical trial? Pre-approval access, bringing the patient voice into developing a clinical trial. Okay, so they came to me. I'm like, great. So I'm a person who works from a company. I need to bring in a person living with the disease. I need to bring in a caregiver. I need to bring in an advocacy organization, and I need to bring in a scientist. And so then they'll help me. I'll find the people that can each represent that. I'll moderate it. I'll be the biopharma point of view, but it's really important to bring in other people. So whatever your expertise is, and bring that around a panel. If you have a diagnostic for a disease, it would be great to say, ironically, last couple of weeks ago in New York City, I met someone that is developing an early diagnostic for ovarian cancer. I hope they're successful. But I was thinking, wow, wouldn't that be a great panel at an oncology to sit with a couple other oncology companies that are developing therapies for ovarian cancer with the companion diagnostic, because that's the problem with ovarian cancer. We don't find it till it's stage 4. So it's finding people who have synergies with what you're doing and then getting them on the panel and discussing that. And always, if you can, bring in someone with lived experience, because we think we might know what it might be like, but we really don't because we don't live it.
Yeah. And that's another area I was going to ask you about is kind of that storytelling. Like, how do you weave your company's story as you're kind of presenting the scientific presentations and things of that nature without losing that credibility?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really important that I mean, you're there, you're representing the company, so you have you should represent what you're doing. I always talk about what we're doing in ALS. But again, you have to be mindful of compliance, and our drug is not approved. And so I mean, I think it's fine to say, look, we did, like when I'll weave it in storytelling in that, like, look, we did this trial, these were the results, this is what we learned from it, this is the group we thought benefited, and we're doing another trial, and so the trial is going to be more restrictive. And so I might ask the question, how do you feel about having a trial that's more restrictive but actually might give you an answer if the drug works or not, and ask the audience. So there's ways to weave your company in and your data and be compliant and be ethical.
Okay.
And you could, I
Yeah.
mean, for someone with a diagnostic, how would you feel, if you were, could diagnose X, 1 year earlier? I mean, one of the issues with ALS is it takes 2 years for people to get a diagnosis. because they
Right.
go from doctor to doctor to doctor. I mean, sometimes it's shorter, but on average, and so we've been working on that. But after you've had symptoms for 2 years, you're timed out of almost every ALS trial because usually the inclusion criteria is 2 years. And so there's ways to weave things in, around the policies, around the diagnostic journey, you know, around your company, um, without being promotional, because we can't be promotional if we don't have an FDA approved product.
Right. Well, yeah, thank you very much. This has been extremely insightful. If you have any closing thoughts, you can go ahead and
Well, I'll just share my contact information in case anybody wants to reach out to me. So that's my email. I'm on LinkedIn. So, connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. If you have other questions, email me. If you want to learn more about ALS, I love and hate it all at the same time. I love to talk about it, but it's such a devastating disease. But thank you. I really enjoyed being here today. And Dylan, thank you so much for inviting me.
thank you very much, Mary Kay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And please be sure to be on the lookout for next month's AZBioPEERS. We'll be focused on CROs and CRMs. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great week.